try to sum it up again, but Gladys, give me a chance. Good morning, everybody. We are January 15, 2025. I'm going to leave it to our wonderful Gladys to give us the Hebrew date later, just in 2 minutes. But for now, I just want to make a reflection. I don't know where I heard it, but let's check our calendars. Apparently, this month of Tevet is very rare that at most days of our calendar are exactly the same number as the solar calendar. So check it out and see if I'm right. I read that somewhere. But I hope everybody saw. Hi, my name is Sandra Kuku, and I'm happy to chair the Women's Learning Group, which is the brainchild of Rabbi Ornstein. And today he is our speaker, along with Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik. And we're so honored because he's back with us, and he's the creator of this program. And we've been it's the crown jewel of our synagogue, the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of Montreal. So I hope everybody watched, and if you didn't, please take a few minutes to watch the video of Caroline Glick that I put at the bottom, scrolling down, of the last email I sent to everybody announcing this fourth lecture about the endurance of Israel, with the story, the fabulous story of Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Each one of these statesmen, he's a rabbi, but he had to put his statesman hat when Jerusalem was being burnt to the ground, just before it was being burnt to the ground. And each one of these big towering figures in Jewish history that we have been studying and we will be studying until the end, they were the ones who saved Judaism. Judaism will never die. And it's because of these individuals, and certainly in the future, forever, there will be individuals like that who will stand up for Judaism. Judaism will never die. I heard that from a rabbi. And it's because of people like this. Now, if you saw Caroline Glick's video, it was basically saying how the left in Israel is trying their very best to bring down Netanyahu's government. And I added that video in the email about this lecture number 4, because there is nothing new under the sun. Those are King Solomon's words. It's exactly the same scenario playing out today as did in the days of Yochanan Ben Zakkai. And just don't hear me, hear Caroline Glick. She's the one who will say it. And I will send it again. And I will also send Gigi Biton's brilliant summaries. She writes so beautifully. And if we missed any nugget from any of our lectures, it's all there in a tapestry that she writes so nicely. So we're very grateful to her. She's our historian. And so, Gladys, what is the Hebrew date of today?
Thank you, Sandra. You are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Revived the Women Learning program. Without you, we wouldn't be able to continue.
Well, we have you and Rabbi Ornstein to thank for the program.
Thank you. And thank you, Rabbi Ornstein, and thank you to all of you. Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome everyone for joining us today, 15 Tevet 5785.
And it's January 15.
January 15, 2025, and wish you a very happy, healthy, peaceful, and a prosperous New Year 2025. Our topic today is about the great personality of Yochanan Ben Zakkai, narrated by Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik of the Spanish and Portuguese Synagogue of New York. Prepared by Sandra Cuckoo, Chair of Women Learning Group, Montreal. Hosted by our previous beloved Rabbi Shahar Orstein, who created this wonderful program of the Women's Learning Group. Its 15th anniversary was celebrated brilliantly last year by Sandra Cuckoo with great music. Its creation followed Ladies Bat Mitzvah of our 25 women celebrated by Rabbi Orstein on July 5, 2009. Thank you, Rabbi Orstein, for honoring us. Thank you, Sandra. And thank you all for joining us through the fourth session of Series 31. We wish to see you joining us for the rest of 11 monthly sessions to learn together and enjoy. Thank you all. Thank you, Sandra.
Rabbi Ornstein, the floor is yours, and you can give it to Ksenia to start the video whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. It's so great just to be here with you once again, and just it's amazing the warmth that can be transmitted via Zoom. So I'm just really happy to see each and every one of you, and I've been saying hi to each person individually on the chat who I didn't say hello to by interacting by voice. And thank you. I mean, I feel for me, this is an honor to be with you and for all of us to be affiliated with such an important Canadian institution. You know, the Spanish and Portuguese. It's just a very historic congregation, and I have so many wonderful memories. And in part, what I've been doing is spreading Spanish and Portuguese congregation throughout the world since I've left, and it's always so wonderful to come back and to get we say in French ressourcement, right? To get reinvigorated, and I'm just so thrilled that this continues, that this program. Who knew in 2009 that this incredible and group of women would continue for so many years and do such wonderful programs. And you know, my only regret is that I've missed some of the programs this year. I've been quite busy. I mentioned earlier, right now I'm in Denver at a rabbinic conference, and so it's just wonderful to take a time out and to learn and study together with you from a wonderful teacher, Rav Meir Soloveitchik, who, just to put everything into a little bit of context, Rav Meir Soloveitchik is connected to the Soloveitchik family from Yeshiva University, and Rabbi, our wonderful Rabbi Joseph studied at Yeshiva University, and Norma, and they're very connected to the Soloveitchik family. And it's quite amazing that Soloveitchik is now at the Spanish and Portuguese in New York, which is the mother synagogue. I won't go into the full history, but they lent they were helpful when the Spanish was being established in Montreal. And so there's all these connections. And so it's wonderful. And Rav Meir Soloveitchik is quite an impressive scholar, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing his take on Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai, who is a very important historical figure that people should know more about, but they don't know. And afterwards, I'm going to share with you some of what I've learned from some of my teachers, one in particular of Rav Yochanan Ben Zakkai, and why, just like Sandra was saying, why he's still such an important and relevant figure and historical personality for our day, and what we can learn from him. So I think that's weaves together a whole bunch of threads, And I'm really excited to see and to learn together with you. So,
I have
so
only one thing to add. It's only you could have designed a program that could have lasted so long, and that is your legacy with us.
well, and it
Thank
takes
you, Rabbi.
engaged people like you. And yeah, I was, it was a, I didn't know, but there was some, it was an inspired, it was an inspired
Yeah, because
creation.
one of your speakers once said, I've never seen a group of women so engaged. They keep asking questions, and the questions keep coming.
And
It's a wonderful
yeah,
group.
yeah, and the way we structured it was obviously very powerful. Actually, that's what I'm speaking about today, if you can believe it or not, in Denver, is how structure is important, like the structure, how we structured the women's learning group. And that shows that if you structure things right, and sometimes we overlook the importance of that. So I'm going to, again, that's what I'm saying. It's like what we, I'm sharing that with a whole bunch of rabbis here. And so I'm really excited. It's actually a very big day. Right after this, I'm
Well, we're
presenting to a whole
so
bunch of
grateful
rabbis.
that you took your time out of this important convention that you're at. We're very grateful that you joined us, and you're going out on a limb, actually. You made an exception. Thank you, Rabbi. So, Ksenia, it's all yours. And I have to say, it's thanks to Ksenia thanks to Rabbi Ornstein that we have Ksenia.
In 1961, a public debate took place in Canada that is little known today, but whose lessons and legacy should rightly resound throughout the Jewish generations. The event was precipitated by the arrival in Quebec of the British scholar Arnold Toynbee, then a public celebrity and the most famous historian in the world, known for his multi-volume study that sought to explain all of human history. Toynbee had argued that every civilization necessarily experiences the four states of genesis, growth, breakdown, and death. Toynbee, of course, was aware that there seemed to be exceptions to this principle, and that there was at least one particular people that appeared to have defied these general rules and continued to endure. And that, of course, is the Jews. Toynbee, however, portrayed Judaism as a fossil civilization, a remnant from the past, which, in his view, had not fully died and yet was not really alive. Following the destruction of the temple, according to Toynbee, the Pharisaic or rabbinic Jews renounced and rejected politics for pacifism, nationalism for nonviolence, statehood for spiritual law. For Toynbee, through their rigid dedication to rabbinic law, Jews became a fossil, frozen in time, with no vibrancy of a true civilization. And the father of this fossilized form of Judaism for Toynbee was Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, who had stolen out of Jerusalem before it fell to the Romans in 70 CE and established an academy in Yavne, elsewhere in the Holy Land. Toynbee describes this purportedly quietistic form of Judaism in the following way, quote, "Before the net of Roman circumvallation fully closed in on the devoted holy city, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai independently took the momentous decision to break with the tradition of militancy which Judas Maccabeus had inaugurated," end quote. And Toynbee added that, quote, "In act and word, Yochanan Ben Zakkai was proclaiming his conversion from the way of violence to the way of gentleness. And through this conversion, he became the founder of the new Jewry, which survived, albeit only as a fossil," end quote. Those are Toynbee's words, albeit only as a fossil. And this fossil for Toynbee was the Judaism of the next 2,000 years. This is, of course, preposterous. Yochanan Ben Zakkai is indeed the father of post-temple Judaism, but the notion that this form of faith existed in rejection of all that came before is utterly untrue. The very rabbinic Judaism of which Rav Yochanan was patriarch and progenitor celebrated throughout the centuries the victories of Judas Maccabeus. Even as the rabbis, as we discussed last week, did not celebrate the Hasmonean monarchy that evolved, nevertheless they continued from generation to generation to mark the miraculous victory of the war against Greek tyranny. But Toynbee's depiction and approach to what Judaism became played into his own anti-Zionism. Once a member of the British Foreign Office who had opposed the Balfour Declaration, Toynbee denounced the founding of Israel as immoral, as not in continuity with Jewish history, and he even compared the IDF to Nazis. When visiting McGill University in Montreal, Toynbee was asked if he stood by his description of Judaism as a fossil and of Israelis as akin to Nazi Germany. The historian answered in the affirmative, and this made it to the attention of Yaakov Herzog, a young man still in his 30s, serving as Israel's ambassador to Canada. As Herzog's biographer, Michael Bar Zohar, tells us, quote, Herzog was appalled. A foreign ambassador, he said to a friend, cannot remain in a country in which such things have been said about his people. An ambassador cannot remain in a country in which his nation's honor is violated not only from a political standpoint, but from the standpoint of its moral and historical character. If he keeps silent and stays on, it's as if he concurred with the shedding of his people's blood, end quote. And so Herzog issued a public statement insisting that, quote, Professor Toynbee's statement has nothing to do with morality or the facts, and he added that in view of the gravity of Professor Toynbee's declaration, I challenge him to debate me openly in a public venue of his choice. Toynbee ultimately agreed, and they met at the McGill Hillel House. During the debate, Toynbee focused on the morality of Israel's founding, and Herzog, even though he defended the creation of Israel and the morality of that moment with great eloquence, Herzog also kept turning back to the history of Rabbinic Judaism, attempting to illustrate that its civilization was anything other than a fossil. And we must understand his motivation, which is that Ambassador Herzog was more than merely an ambassador of a newborn modern state. He was also the son of Rabbi Isaac Halevi Herzog, originally chief rabbi of Mandate Palestine, and then the first chief rabbi of Israel, one of the great Talmudic scholars of his generation, a leader of religious Zionism, and a hero to his son. I have spent some time reading Ambassador Herzog's speeches, and it's quite clear that in his view, Yochanan Ben Zakkai served as his father's inspiration, as Chief Rabbi Herzog's inspiration. Therefore, Ambassador Herzog took the intellectual and spiritual legacy of Yochanan Ben Zakkai quite personally, and he took great pains in his Montreal debate to defend the vitality of all that Yochanan Ben Zakkai had brought about. You can all go on YouTube and listen to the entire debate, for it was in the end a total triumph for Herzog. And reportedly, as the event came to the close, Toynbee's wife was heard saying something to her husband like, I told you you shouldn't have debated him. We too today will praise the legacy of Yochanan Ben Zakkai, the statesman, scholar, teacher, visionary, who is indeed the father of the Judaism that we live today. But we will seek to better understand his actions in Judaism's great moment of exile and learn how, rather than producing the fossilization of the Jews, Yochanan Ben Zakkai was actually the one man who prevented it, ensuring the continuity of the people of Israel so that they could endure, live, spiritually thrive, and return to Israel in our age. What do we know of Yochanan Ben Zakkai? Of his origins, little is told, though we are informed that he was one of the youngest and best students of the great sage Hillel in Jerusalem. Hillel had served as Nasi, patriarch, head of the Sanhedrin, and because Hillel was a descendant of David, a rule had been instituted that only Hillel's descendants would serve in this position, thereby emphasizing the Jewish political and religious link to Jerusalem, where David had himself once reigned. Thus, in the last years of the Second Temple, even as Yochanan would have been Hillel's greatest living disciple, nevertheless leadership of the Sanhedrin would have been placed in the hands of Hillel's descendants, Shimon and his son Gamliel. Then, in 66 CE, what was known as the Great Jewish Revolt against Rome began in Judea. open resistance to the brutality and religious insensitivity of the Roman procurator Gessius Florus. Many different groups, many different Jewish factions opposed the Romans, and several of them were known as zealots, led by rival leaders Shimon bar Giora and Yochanan of Gush Chalav. In contrast to the zealots, the rabbis of Jerusalem advocated making peace and surrendering to the Romans. And when that was refused by the zealot groups, Yochanan Ben Zakkai sought to escape, to lay the foundations of Judaism for after Jerusalem fell. Rabbinic literature contains no less than 4 versions of this tale, and though the differences between them are interesting, I believe that by and large they each inform the other. I take them as at times literal, at times symbolic descriptions of Ben Zakkai's worldview, which allow us to create a composite of his personality and perspective. And because we are considering, as Toynbee claimed to be doing, the impact of the worldview of Rabbi Yochanan on generations of Jews, we can therefore look first and foremost to the text that proved most influential over the generations, which is the version of the tale found in the Babylonian Talmud, which places Yochanan in the midst of the Roman siege, with Jerusalem dying of starvation, and the zealots executing any fellow Jews who would attempt to escape the city and surrender to the Romans. Yochanan therefore contacted a relative of his who was a member of the zealots. I cite sections of the Talmudic text. Quote, "The Biryoni," this means the zealots, "were then in the city. The rabbi said to them, 'Let us go out and make peace with the Romans.' They, the zealots, would not let them, but on the contrary said, 'Let us go out and fight them.' The rabbi said, 'You will not succeed.' They, the zealots, then rose up and burnt the stores of wheat and barley, so that a famine ensued." This means that the zealots destroyed the food belonging to their Jewish political opponents, and as we shall see, this Talmudic tale accords with other historical sources. At this point, Rabbi Yochanan decided that Jerusalem was doomed, and he reached out to a relative, a member of the zealots. We continue the tale. Rabbi Yochanan sent to him, saying, "Come to visit me privately." When he came, he said to him, "How long are you going to carry on in this way and kill all the people with starvation?" He replied, "What can I do? If I say a word to them, they will kill me." Meaning, if I speak up to the zealot leadership, I'll be killed myself. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Devise some plan for me to escape. Perhaps I shall be able to save a little." This phrase, "save a little," is a word that appears often in versions of Rabbi Yochanan's story. The Aramaic "hatzalah purta" can best, I think, be translated as "save whatever we can save." Jerusalem, he was convinced, would fall, and so he sought to save whatever could be saved. The phrase has a haunting echo 2,000 years later, when during the Holocaust, Chief Rabbi Herzog, the ambassador's father, visited FDR in Washington. And according to his biographer, Shaul Meizlich, this is what he said, quote, "I call upon his honor as someone in a position of power, in the name of human conscience, in the name of human liberty, in the name of justice, to prevent the butchering of the Jews and allow the survivors the possibility of reaching safe havens. Mr. President," said Rabbi Herzog, "I am not the person who will advise you on how to deal with this terrible problem. I come only with a plea and also a warning. The plea, save what can be saved. The warning, those who stood by will be held accountable in the future." Here, Yochanan Ben Zakkai hears history's call, and he seeks to save what can be saved. Rabbi Herzog went to FDR. Rabbi Yochanan, millennia earlier, attempts something even more audacious, to seek out the very Roman rulers who were about to destroy Jerusalem, to ask for permission to save what could be saved. The problem was that the zealots would slaughter any Jews seeking to surrender. Only dead bodies were allowed out of the city. Rabbi Yochanan's relative, therefore, suggests that he, Rabbi Yochanan, pretend to die. I quote further in the Talmudic tale. He said to him, "Pretend to be ill and let everyone come to inquire about you. Bring something evil-smelling and put it by you so that they will say you are dead. Let then your disciples get under your bed," meaning carry the coffin, "but no others, so that they shall not notice that you are still light, since they know that a living being is lighter than a corpse." He did so, and Rabbi Eliezer, his student, went under the coffin from one side, and Rabbi Joshua from the other. When they reached the door, meaning the gate to Jerusalem, some men wanted to put a lance, a spear, through the bier, through the coffin, to ensure that he was dead. He, Rabbi Yochanan's relative from the Zealots, said, "Shall the Romans say they have pierced their master?" So instead they wanted to give it a push to ensure that he was dead. He, again Rabbi Yochanan's relative, said, "Shall they say that they pushed their master?" They opened the gate for him, and he got out. We must pause again to ponder this image. Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai escapes the downfall of Jerusalem by pretending to be dead. The future rebirth of Rabbinic Judaism is born out of Jerusalem on a coffin, life and death inextricably bound up with each other. The coffin, some suggest, embodies the death of the immediate hope and dream of independence, of overthrowing Rome. The death, indeed, of preserving Jewish Jerusalem, at least for now, of preserving the temple, at least for now. It is, in other words, an assumption that the temple, the locus of Jewish aspirations, is about to burn. And this union of faith with hard-headed realism is essential to understanding Yochanan Ben Zakkai. There's a fascinating book called Learned Optimism by Martin Seligman, the father of positive psychology. Seligman recounts therein how he was interested in studying resilience, optimism, a refusal to give up, and how that can impact success in life. And so he thought to himself, what profession experiences rejection more than any other? And the answer, he realized, was insurance salesman. And so he decided to study that. He partnered with MetLife to create psychological profiles of job applicants, salesmen, people seeking to be salesmen. And he worked with salesmen, choosing them not based on their intelligence, but rather based on what he called their explanatory style. Salesmen for whom rejection and failure that they experienced, they thought was not their fault, but rather a result of temporary external factors, so that it only inspired them to work harder. The experiments were an extraordinary success, and MetLife hired optimistic insurance salesmen based on Seligman's guidance. Now here's what's interesting. I read in an article how MetLife also asked Seligman to apply his methods at the company's leadership level to ensure only instinctively optimistic executives. And he said no, because in leadership, having only optimism would be disastrous. In his book, Seligman puts it this way, quote, "In many arenas of life, optimism is unwarranted. At times, we do fail irretrievably. And seeing those times through rose-colored glasses may console us, but will not change them. In some situations, the cockpit of an airliner, for example, what's needed is not an upbeat view, but a mercilessly realistic one. Sometimes we need to cut our losses and invest elsewhere, rather than find reasons to hold on." End quote. The realist that was Rabbi Yochanan was willing to die in order to live, to give up at least for a period on an independent Jerusalem, to prepare for the long, hard centuries to come. But why was Rabbi Yochanan so sure that the Zealots' revolt would fail? Why had he eschewed the optimism of the rebels? Did he himself not celebrate David's victory over Goliath, Hezekiah's over Assyria, Judah's over the Seleucids? Why is he so sure that Jerusalem will fall? And moreover, the Romans, even if they win, usually in conquering a city, did not raze it to the ground. So why was he so convinced that surrender was preferable, and that if surrender would not occur, the ravaging of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, was all but certain? So when we continue the story in the Talmud, a historical hint is given to us. We are told that he came before the general overseeing the assault on Jerusalem, Vespasian, who would become emperor, and actually impressed Vespasian with the prediction that he was about to become emperor. Thus the Talmud tells us, when he reached the Romans, he said, "Peace to you, O king, peace to you, O king." At this we are told Vespasian started. But then moments later, quote, "A messenger came to him from Rome saying, 'Up, for the emperor is dead and the notables of Rome have decided to make you head.'" End quote. And I think what the text is attempting symbolically to communicate to us is that it was, Rabbi Yochanan realized, Vespasian's very rise to the throne that would ensure the utter destruction of the Roman assault. And here, too, Talmudic text accords with history. The Oxford historian Martin Goodman, in his excellent book about the Roman-Jewish War, notes that the notion of Vespasian as an all-powerful emperor who brought Judea to its knees and founded an imperial dynasty would have been unthinkable several years before 69 to 70. In fact, Goodman informs us, quote, Vespasian had been appointed in 66 by Nero to command the Roman forces against the rebellious Jews, partly because of his political insignificance. The son of a tax farmer, he was in his late 50s and had enjoyed a worthy but not a brilliant career, end quote. And so Nero, who was worried about his own assassination, which ultimately did occur, chose Vespasian precisely because he thought that he could never be a threat to his own imperial rule. That is why he chose. As Goodman tells us, that is why he, quote, preferred to entrust the control of 3 legions for the Judean war to Vespasian, precisely because he was a competent mediocrity. That such a man might become emperor without breeding or context among the aristocracy was unimaginable, end quote. But, he goes on to explain, after Nero's assassination and the destruction of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, then suddenly Vespasian's candidacy for the throne became more plausible, but he needed a resume. What Goodman calls, quote, the gloss of foreign conquest, the surest foundation of authority for a Roman politician, for him to be portrayed in the capital as warrior, hero, and savior of the state, end quote. Thus, even as Vespasian made his way back to Rome, he left behind his son Titus, instructing him to establish a political pedigree through achieving victory as quickly as possible. Thus, Goodman writes, quote, at the heart of Titus's eventual victory was thus the ruthlessness of his assault, which paid little heed either to damage caused to the city or to the losses on his own side, end quote. This, the very fact that Vespasian needed Jerusalem's destruction in order to survive as emperor, in order to create a resume of victory and brutality, this, I think, is what alerted Rabbi Yochanan to the fact that what faced the Jews was not merely military defeat and subjugation, but the destruction of their sacred city itself. But there is more. As we've previously discussed, Jerusalem was originally conquered by King David as a symbol, to stand as a symbol of Jewish unity. And Jerusalem, therefore, he felt could not stand if it was a site of Jewish hatred for and violence against one another. Josephus describes how the rival factions slaughtered each other even as they fought Rome, and they burnt, as we mentioned, each other's foods. Recall Yochanan's statement to the Zealots. How long will you cause all of us, he says during the siege, to die of starvation? He blames the hatred of rival factions for each other, for the starving, not the Romans. And Josephus says the same, quote, it was as if to oblige the Romans they were destroying all that the city had laid up against a siege and hamstringing their own powers. The result, he writes, at any rate, was that all the buildings round the temple were burnt to the ground. The city became a desolate no man's land where they flung themselves at each other's throats, and almost all the grain, enough to support them through many years of siege, went up in flames. And he adds, it was hunger that defeated them, a thing that could never have happened if they had not brought it about themselves. In their hatred for each other, the Jews of Jerusalem brought it upon themselves. 2,000 years later, that moment would be cited by Menachem Begin when he stood on the ship Altalena as Ben-Gurion's forces fired upon him. And Begin ordered those who followed his orders not to fire back. The ship on which he stood carried much-needed arms for the battle in Jerusalem, but Begin essentially said that if they allowed civil war to descend, if they allowed Jews to fight Jews, then Jerusalem would not deserve to be saved. Jewish hatred, even more than Rome, destroyed ancient Jerusalem. And Yochanan Ben Zakkai, seeing a Jerusalem where Jews slaughtered Jews, sensed that the city would fall not only because of the brutality of Vespasian's assault, but because a Jerusalem that had eschewed Jewish unity had no right to expect the miracle of the Almighty's intervention. Thus, in another rabbinic text describing Ben Zakkai's flight, he ultimately returns with his student to see the smoldering ruins of the temple, and he consoles his student with the message that loving kindness will need to replace sacrifices. Toynbee, in his books, loves this source, cites this statement as a symbol of Ben Zakkai giving up the political and military past. But this is entirely wrong. As we shall see, he never gave up on Jerusalem. The sages point in this passage is that if they would never learn to love one another, then they could never aspire to deserve Jerusalem again. Jews could only deserve Jerusalem if they could unite. Jews that killed each other, that destroyed the food belonging to one another, had no right to expect that God would allow them to remain independent in Jerusalem. So if my analysis is correct, then Yochanan Ben Zakkai emerges as both militarily and politically astute, but also spiritually attuned to all that Jerusalem was and could be. Escaping Jerusalem, he stands before Roman military leaders, and whereas in one rabbinic source he does first plead for Jerusalem, in the Talmud his requests are seemingly more modest, but two of them resound throughout our history. The first and most famous, Tein li Yavne v'chachameha, give me Yavne and its sages, meaning he's asking the Romans, allow me to establish an academy, a yeshiva, on the coast in the town of Yavne, where Torah will be taught and transmitted. This is the essence of the rabbinic worldview, that the Jewish people are chosen, and the Torah is the embodiment of that chosenness. Therefore, if the Jewish people can endure without independence for now, they still cannot endure without the Torah. Thus did Torah study begin in Yavne. But we must understand, ladies and gentlemen, that what took place there was much more than rote repetition. There in Yavne was born the originality and diversity of Jewish learning. A couple of years ago, I hosted a very prominent non-Jewish political columnist at Yeshiva University. He came on Hanukkah, and it was very interesting as I showed him around, took him from place to place. It was interesting seeing the oddities of Jewish life through non-Jewish eyes. So I took him into a Hanukkah party, and I took him over to the latkes, and I explained to him, I said, these are latkes. They're potato pancakes that are deep fried in oil. We eat them because on Hanukkah the miracle happened with oil, so to commemorate this we eat foods fried in oil. And he looks at me and he says, no, seriously, why do you eat them? And he couldn't even conceive that this would be so flimsy an excuse the Jews would use just to eat incredibly unhealthy food. But I also took him into the Beit Midrash of the yeshiva, the study hall. You walk right in, and to him, at first glance, it looks like a library. But then you realize that the students are sitting over these books, and they are yelling at each other. They are shouting, each taking their own approach to the text, providing their own interpretation. And he looked at me, my guest, and he said, how do they concentrate? And it was striking to me because actually if you're used to the clamor of the yeshiva of the study hall, you actually can't concentrate without it. You can't just sit and focus in the quiet without the din. It is this cacophony of the study hall, which to Jews is harmony. That is what Yavne brought about. And the hint of this is found in Pirkei Avot, which is known as the Ethics of the Fathers. We are told, quote, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai had 5 disciples, namely Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yosei the priest, Rabbi Shimon ben Netanel, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. He, Rabbi Yochanan, used to recount their praise. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus is a plastered well that never loses a drop. Yoshua ben Hananiah, happy the one who gave him birth. Yosei the priest, a pious man. Shimon ben Netanel, a man who fears sin. Elazar ben Arach, an ever-flowing spring. This is what we are told about his students. And the passage seems incongruent with the genre of Avot, which usually provides us with religious maxims, not praise for students. But rightly understood, what is being given here is a moral maxim. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who cites this passage, puts it this way, quote, it is easy to have students who are uncritical devotees, but never become creative intellects in their own right. It is not difficult to create followers. It is far harder to create leaders. Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai was a great teacher, he writes, because 5 of his students became giants in their own right. The Mishnah, meaning this passage, is telling us how he did it. He showed each of his pupils where their particular strength lay. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, the plastered well that never loses a drop, was gifted with a superb memory, an important gift in an age in which manuscripts were rare and the oral law was not yet committed to writing. Shimon ben Netanel, the man who feared sin, may not have had the intellectual brilliance of the others, but his reverential nature was a reminder.
Today I'm going to... I don't understand why it switched. 1 second.
Sorry.
Particular strength lay. Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, the plastered well that never loses a drop, was gifted with a superb memory, an important gift in an age in which manuscripts were rare and the oral law was not yet committed to writing. Shimon ben Netanel, the man who feared sin, may not have had the intellectual brilliance of the others, but his reverential nature was a reminder to others that they were not mere scholars, but also holy men engaged in a sacred task. Elazar ben Arach, the ever-flowing spring, had a creative mind, constantly giving rise to new interpretations of ancient texts. End quote. Thus, it is in Yavna, ladies and gentlemen, that an educational philosophy is created that emphasizes, yes, Torah study, but also difference, creativity, innovation, creating thereby an intellectual culture that would define the next 2,000 years of Jewish learning, all linked to one Torah text, and yet dazzling in its diversity. What Yochanan Ben Zakkai is doing, therefore, is actually creating the exact opposite of what Toynbee associates with his achievement. The intellectual vibrancy of Jewish learning, and therefore the diversity of learning that followed him, is not the story of a fossil, but indeed of an intellectual culture that is awe-inspiring. And this point was made by Herzog in his debate with Toynbee. And if you listen, as I urge you to do, you'll be struck by Ambassador Herzog's eloquence and also his wonderful Irish accent. Because actually, Ambassador Herzog grew up in Ireland because his father, the great Rabbi Herzog, before he became chief rabbi in Mandate Palestine, served as the chief rabbi of Ireland, a job that was described by a later chief rabbi of Ireland as involving being the chief rabbi of a country that's 93% Catholic, 7% Protestant, and the rest is Jewish. So he grew up in Ireland, and then they went to the land of Israel. And so he has this wonderful accent when you speak, and they are speaking to the man, to Toynbee, who had considered Judaism an ossified form of faith. The young, brash, eloquent ambassador of Israel said the following, quote, "If you think of Jewish civilization in terms of its impact on world civilization down the ages, the terms of its creativity, and sir, you will pardon me if I observe that in your work you do not mention any creative Jewish activity since about 2,300 years ago, actually since Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. You do not mention," said Herzog to Toynbee, "you do not mention the academies of learning in Palestine, in Jerusalem, Safed, learning in mysticism, Mishnah, Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, Targum, Masorah, poetry, the first Paitanim who laid the basis for modern Jewish poetry, right down the ages, and Hasidim and the whole movement of a living body of people. These," he said, "are not mentioned by you." All this is true, and all this is the achievement of the culture of learning created by Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. But that is not the rabbi's only request from the Romans. The fact remains that Ben Zakkai acted not only as a scholar, but statesman. And what he asks of Rome is not only spiritual, but political. "Give me Yavna and its sages," he is supposed to have said. But also, he asks, "Give me the dynasty of Rabbi Gamliel." What this means is that he was asking for the continuation of the politico-spiritual position of the descendants of Hillel, the descendants of King David, as supreme leaders of the Sanhedrin. He asked for this because he saw it as the source of the Holy Land's, of the Jewry of the Holy Land's unity, and for their enduring connection to the Jewish past and to Jerusalem. For only in remembering David could Jerusalem continue to be remembered. It's often said, too often, that Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai created a Judaism in which the synagogue and the study hall replaced the temple. That's not exactly right. The Mishnah records that rituals were instituted by Rabbi Yochanan as a zecher lemikdash, to remember what took place in the temple. In Yavneh, the liturgy was ordained. The prayers were composed to be said towards Jerusalem at the precise time the offerings took place in Jerusalem, and part of what they were saying were prayers for the restoration of Jerusalem. Every aspect of the laws of the sacrifices, of the rituals of the temple, were taught in Yavna, preserved by the generations, recorded ultimately in the Mishnah. An entire blueprint of the temple, remembering it as it stood, inch by inch, was preserved in one of these tractates, known as Midot, measurements, remembering what once was, and the rabbis ardently believed what would be again. It is in Yavne that the Hillelian Davidic dynasty was saved, and it is in Yavne, which was indeed dominated by learning and prayer, but it was in Yavne that the attachment to Jerusalem and the longing for its restoration was enshrined. Thus, from Yavne, two complementary facts of Jewish history were created. As Jews spread around the earth, the evolution of vibrant Torah study continued with them. But at the same time, their connection to the land remained, prayers toward Jerusalem remained, a Jewish presence in the land remained. Thus, in the debate about the Jewish right to Israel, Herzog told Toynbee, quote, "Of all the ancient peoples of the Middle East, we are the only one living in continuity today in the Middle East, speaking the same language, practicing the same religious faith." And he added, "Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai," he said to Toynbee, "to whom you devote much attention, he and Rabbi Akiva and Bar Kochva, if they were to come to life and could live with us, would not find a dichotomy that snapped them asunder. There is a continuity of experience." End quote. Yochanan Ben Zakkai is known as a scholar, but he is accorded honor by the Talmud as a statesman because he helped save a Jewish polity and he defined Jewish civilization. When Hillel's heir, Gamliel, arrived in Yavne, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, wishing to accord honor to Davidic leadership, seems to have stepped off the historical scene, leaving the very academy he created, a Jewish version of Washington giving up power and returning to Mount Vernon. George III famously said when that occurred, "If Washington does that, he will be the greatest man in the world, because no one gives up power." Yochanan Ben Zakkai was one of the greatest Jews in the world, and had he so chosen, he could have replaced the house of Hillel with himself, destroyed the remembrance of the Davidic dynasty. But he knew that the link to Jerusalem would then have potentially been torn asunder. As he died, Yochanan Ben Zakkai's last words on earth, according to the Talmud, were, "Prepare the throne for Hezekiah the king, for he is coming." Hezekiah was the last Davidic king to reign securely over a Jerusalem that was simultaneously truly righteous and politically independent. And Yochanan thereby ended his life by expressing his hope and aspiration that all that he did when Jerusalem fell would sustain Judaism until it rose in Jerusalem again. To save what could be saved, to emphasize the familial unity of the Jewish people, to preserve the ties to David and Jerusalem, and ensure the teaching and learning of Torah. Only thus will Judaism survive. This is the vision of Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, and it is an example that inspired rabbinic leaders when Jews in the future face disaster, as he once did. Chief Rabbi Herzog, Ambassador Herzog's father, was of course to be disappointed by Roosevelt and by many others. Not all were saved who could be saved. And after the fall of Nazi Germany, the chief rabbi of Mandate Palestine spent 6 months circling Europe looking for orphans. Many Jewish orphans who had been hidden with non-Jews, who were in danger of being lost to their people. And so he circled orphanages and monasteries throughout the continent, just looking for children. Meanwhile, in Palestine, the apparatus of the state was being built. Of course, one might have suggested that they needed their chief rabbi, but Rabbi Herzog, ardent Zionist that he was, understood at the same time that only if he dedicated himself to saving Jews around the world and showed his love for them, could he have reason to merit seeing an independent Jerusalem. 500 children were saved by Chief Rabbi Herzog. 500 children who would have been lost to the Jewish people forever. 500 children placed on a boat to the land of Israel. He saved what he could save, just like his role model. Because Ambassador Herzog said the following about his father. His father, who had been the last chief rabbi of an unfree Jewry in British Palestine and the first chief rabbi of the Third Jewish Commonwealth. He said about his father as follows, quote, He, the last spiritual leader of the destruction, remembered the first leader of the same destruction, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, who before his death almost 2,000 years ago instructed his disciples to prepare a throne for Hezekiah, king of Judah, as a tangible symbol of faith that the kingdom of Israel would surely be restored. In the same way, said Herzog, my father of blessed memory found the strength to soothe the bereaved people from one end of the earth to the other with the assurance of consolation and the approaching of salvation. If his body was bowed by the agony of his people, his soul looked forward with absolute confidence to redemption. End quote. This is indeed who Yochanan Ben Zakkai actually was, a man who allowed Israel to endure without Jerusalem, but who never let them forget Jerusalem, a man bowed by the agony of his people, but who looked onward to redemption, a man who was realistically prepared for Jewish exile, but who sowed the political and spiritual seeds of Jewish return, an intellectual, and gave us an intellectual and religious heritage that is one of the wonders of the world, and reveals the Jewish people over the last 2,000 years to be anything other than a fossil. The hard truth, however, is that it is not only antagonists like Toynbee who misunderstood the legacy of Ben Zakkai. Even some of the heroic founders of Israel failed to understand him and celebrate him. Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, who like Rabbi Herzog was one of the post-war leaders of religious Zionism, once reflected with great pain on the fact that Israel's leaders themselves sometimes identified Yochanan Ben Zakkai with defeat and gave him no credit for the achievements of modern Israel. Rabbi Soloveitchik said, quote, when Chaim Weizmann opened the Israeli Knesset on Tu B'Shvat 5709, he gave a list of all the dreamers and fighters. He reflected a list of all the dreamers and fighters who with their self-sacrifice contributed to the miracle of the state of Israel. He began with the Katowice Conference and the Bilu movement in the 1880s. He managed to name Theodor Herzl, Nachum Sokolov, Achad Ha'am, Chaim Nachman Bialik, Eliezer Ben Yehuda, Menachem Osishkin, Louis Brandeis, and Edmund de Rothschild. But, said Rabbi Soloveitchik, Weizmann forgot to mention all the generations from Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai to Rabbi Mendel of Vitebsk, who fasted and bemoaned the destruction of Jerusalem, who ignored all the persecutions, the mockery and laughter, who continued to hope that tomorrow the temple would be rebuilt, and envisioned the great edifice that would tower over all the mountaintops. End quote. We can, of course, understand why they would overlook Rabbi Yochanan. Many secular Zionists sought in statehood Jewish normalization. And the lesson of Yochanan Ben Zakkai is that we are not normal, that Jews are chosen for the Torah, and that ultimately it is the Torah that embodies our eternity. And only when we combine the story of Yochanan Ben Zakkai with the lessons of modern Zionism can a full appreciation of Jewish statehood be deduced. Several years after the debate, Herzog had another run-in with Toynbee, this time in England. Toynbee asked him why the Jewish claim on the Holy Land is different from any other ancient people's connection to their former country. After all, Toynbee said to Herzog, how can I explain to Nasser that here comes a nation after 2,000 years and claims a right to this country? And what shall I tell him, said Toynbee, if he asks me, what about the Vikings in Norway who settled in England 1,000 years ago? What if the Vikings wanted to go back to London? And Herzog essentially replied to Toynbee that Toynbee would have a point. If there were still Vikings, logically, said Herzog, you are right. But there is one small flaw in their argument. There are no Vikings that seek to return to England. How, he said to Toynbee, how can you apply to this case the ordinary laws of history, when, as you yourself have written, over scores of empires and cultures have risen and disappeared from the horizons of civilization during the same period in which this little people has continued to exist? Herzog later reflected on the meaning of this encounter. So long as the world agrees that there is something unique about the Jews in the history of mankind, he wrote, it cannot deny the right of the Jews to this land. In other words, if one discards the idea of Jewish uniqueness in human history, then he continued, he said further, if one discards the idea of Jewish uniqueness in human history, it is very difficult to counter the argument of the intellectual. But if, on the other hand, the idea of Jewish uniqueness is accepted, then there is a reply, which is not only the religious Jewish reply, but which has a place in the 20th century, no less than in any previous century. End quote. We are, in other words, a nation apart, exceptional, eternal. The question, Herzog concluded, quote, is whether this concept denotes a privilege, not an escape from society as a whole, but a unique role within it, or whether it is an anomaly which must be denied and discarded. This is the question of Jewish history, end quote. One cannot defend the existence of the Jewish people as a nation, as a political entity, without embracing the fact of Jewish eternity, the fact that Jews defied Toynbee's rules, and all that this fact implies. Toynbee attacked Israel's founding because he refused to come to terms with the miracle that is the Jewish people, and it falls to us, therefore, to defend and understand the very miracle that Israel makes manifest. Why did we survive until now as a people? What is the source of our salvation? And if the Jews have a special, chosen, spiritual calling, what does that tell us about our role in today's day and age? This is what Rabbi Yochanan's example asks of us, if we truly give him the credit he deserves for Jewish preservation and Jewish return. In the archives of Israel's National Library sits a small card which contains on it a handwritten greeting that Jewish children who survived the Holocaust wrote for Rabbi Herzog when they met him during his travels in Europe. These children were orphaned. Their parents were murdered. They had in their young lives experienced more horror than we can imagine. Yet words that embody the centuries of Jewish endurance and yearning sublimely and succinctly were written by them on this card, which you can find in a wonderful discussion about Rabbi Herzog on the National Library of Israel website. The children wrote in simple, humble Hebrew handwriting the following to the chief rabbi who had been inspired by Yochanan Ben Zakkai. Anachnu yaldei she'erit ha'pleta, we the children of the remnant of the exile, smechim ma'od l'kabel hayom pnei Adonenu harav harashi Rabbeinu Herzog, are so very happy to greet our master, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Herzog. V'navtiach lefanav shena'aleh arza v'na'azor b'vinyana, and we promise in the rabbi's presence that we will ascend to the Holy Land and assist in its rebuilding. Yehi ratzon milifnei avinu shabashamayim, may it be the will of our Father in heaven, shenizkeh lirot b'medina Yehudit mishuchreret lefi ruach Toratenu, that we merit to see an independent Jewish state inspired by the spirit of our Torah. So these children wrote. To face horror and destruction, but to never give up hope. To retain a link to the land, but never forget that it is the spirit of the Torah that inspires us. This is the legacy of Yochanan Ben Zakkai, and that is why, to this very day, his legacy lives still.
Thank you so much, Ksenia. Before I turn it over to Rabbi Ornstein, I just want to mention one thing that I forgot. And thank you so much, Rabbi, for allowing me to describe the video of Caroline Glick, Israel's foremost political commentator. She was mentioning that Israel has done so much to win the war against Hamas, but they're not letting her do that by forcing her to send trucks and trucks of food and medicine to the Gazan Strip. What the cameras can detect are military supplies. But what the cameras cannot detect is money. And so along with food and medical supplies that are going to the Gazan people, whom all of them were fully on board the Holocaust-like behavior of their compatriots during October 7, they're sending money, and this is what's keeping Hamas alive. And this is why we are losing soldiers every day, because they are refueling, they are getting electricity from Israel, whom they attacked, and they are getting tons of money to resupply and to reshape. And that's why we continue to lose soldiers, because they're now recruiting, and with all that money, they're getting more people to become Hamas. So it's like a mushroom, it's coming back and again.
If
And
anyone poured tons of money into Hamas, it's Netanyahu's government in the first place, unfortunately.
yeah, and they're not letting all of the victories that Netanyahu has achieved to reach its final goal. So we cannot wait for January 20 soon enough. Rabbi, I'm sorry, it's all yours.
And I thank you, Sandra. You and it's quite amazing how Rabbi Yochanan still feels so relevant, and there's a lot to unpack here. Right? That's one way of saying it. And I am also aware that we've just sat through about 45 minutes of a really fascinating and well-researched presentation and understanding of Yochanan Ben Zakkai. I took extensive notes, and I have my own thoughts and ways of understanding. And Sandra, just like you, had some burning comment that wanted to come out. I also want to really also open the floor to others, because we have here people who have gone through great calamity and tragedy and have to being uprooted, and and perhaps can relate to Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai and what he was doing. And let me just throw one thread, and then maybe we'll open the floor, and then I'll save some of my comments for later, in the sense that one of the beautiful things that happens at the Spanish is kind of we're trying to preserve, in some way, continue, among others, Babylonian Jewish culture, Iraqi Jewish culture, and Moroccan Jewish culture, and these are whole societies, and there's erased. That's a whole story, but the leaving from Jews from the Middle East and all these countries, and so we're trying to preserve and recreate it in a way. There's some analogy. It's very similar to Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai trying to restore it and maintain the cultures, and it's very difficult. And how do we do that? What do we keep and what do we throw away? These questions, are very difficult to answer and to look at. And I think that could be also part of this discussion and sharing, if you would like. And then towards the end, I can also share some more thoughts as well. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions? And my question to you is, what did you get from Rav Meir Soloveitchik's presentation, and perhaps how you see it, how it might be applied in today? And the floor is open, the Zoom room.
Well, hello, my name's Kesta. I know Shashar. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces Army veteran, and I was a medical assistant and peacekeeper. And I've encountered a lot of what you shared earlier, and I find from an indigenous standpoint, in terms of my culture, as well as what exists in the world in the way of conventions, like the La Hague Convention, the Geneva Convention, the Genocide Convention, as well as just war theory, as it relates to international law. I find that reading that information, exploring that information, and connecting the dots in a rational way goes a long way to displacing the misinformation and disinformation that's out there. So I posted in the chat the tools and resources and internet links to these various conventions, as well as a young woman named Natasha Hausdorff, who is a lawyer for Lawyers for Israel based in London, England. And she, on the internet, in YouTube, gives really poignant, illuminating, and relevant talks on the subjects that were articulated earlier, and debunks and deconstructs the misinformation and disinformation in a heuristic way, meaning looking for seamlessness juxtaposed to disconnection and misrepresentation. So I found the lecture that we just listened to really excellent. And the one thing, a lot of people take Zionism and they twist it into a supposedly untiable knot of misrepresentation. But really, for me, what it boils down to, if you live in a country or your spiritual, cultural, existential essence is rooted in a tradition and a way of being, then patriotism, like in any other country, as long as it doesn't swing too far into the zone of excess, is a virtuous thing, that it should be a given thing, because if you don't like your home and you don't support your home, whether it be religiously, culturally, or existentially, why are you there? And really, it boils down to voice. And the other thing I find that doesn't get brought up in the conversation is the issue of, when did this all really start? Because it did not start in 1948. It started really, if I had to put a window of time, in a short way, back in 1920, 22, 29, in the 1930s. And in 1947, the president of Syria, along with his Arab allies, came in the middle of the night to exterminate by force the escapees of Stalin's pogroms, multiplied by the DPs of World War II under the Nazis. So I find that there's a lot of equivalencies and a lot of
I think you're having problems.
ended insights
here.
based on the lecture.
I
Feel
think
free to look in the chat notes.
If I may, really, your comments are so much appreciated. And I'm going to go even farther than 1920. I'm going to go back to Yochanan Ben Zakkai. That's when it all started, if I may. Rabbi, it's all yours.
So yeah, I would go back, even farther. There are turning points in history. There are turning points in Jewish history. And so, what we've been hearing about is one huge turning point in Jewish history, which is the shift from what some people would call biblical Judaism or temple-based Judaism, right, to rabbinic Judaism, which has lasted really for the last 2,000 years. And we've had Jews in exile for 2,000 years. And now the 20th and the 20th century is and was another turning point, where you have huge calamity once again with the Shoah, and what Rabbi Meir Soloveitchik calls the Third Commonwealth, which is the state of Israel, Medinat Yisrael, the modern state of Israel. So these are big turning points, and there's a lot that it shuffles up, and so and in the same way that Rav Yochanan faced all kinds of questions, we also today we have questions. What does this Medinat Yisrael, the state of Israel, look like, and and I think we're still trying to figure out, And now with October the 7th, this is another huge turning point. If you talk about calamities, and these kinds of decisions and shifts happen, calamities now, we're also trying to figure out what a post-October 7th Israel looks like. And actually, that's one of the panels I'm going to this afternoon. So I also want to maybe this is also a good point to share with you, a teaching from one of my mentors, one of my main mentors, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who talked about this shift from rabbinic to rabbinic Judaism that Rav Meir Soloveitchik talks about. He uses the verse from Hosea 14:3, which says, "Uneshalma farim sfatenu." Uneshalma farim sfatenu, which means we will pay for the cattle, for all the sacrifices. We will replace the sacrifices with the words of our lips, and whether that's through Torah study, and a prayer, words of prayer took a different form. Before we had animal-based sacrifice in the temple, and then post the destruction of the temple, now we use our words and Torah study. Those are the primary means of worship. And so one of the questions also is how things, might turn, and how we need to shift things now that we have a state of Israel. How do our prayers change, and how, what kind of modes of worship? Because I mean, according to my teachers, and we need to shift things, or that we do become fossilized and ossified and hardened. And one of the geniuses of Jewish civilization is not just the Roman period. We're pointing now to the Roman era, but before that, we have the Babylonian period, where we have the Hellenistic period, and we've been in conversation we've adapted, we haven't stayed so rigid, because as the rabbis say, be like the reed that is flexible, rather than like like
That's
the
right.
tree that is like.
Tikva, I'll bring it to the screen. I just got this email from Tikva, and it says, the 10th of Tevet, that was 5 days ago, one of Judaism's minor fast days. It was the day that marks the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem by the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, which culminated in the destruction of the first temple and the Babylonian exile. So we have a fast. So that the shift you're talking about, we were so brilliant at espousing, thanks to our rabbis, because the rabbis were the ones who helped the flexibility be a willow and not an oak. And they were the ones who said, just like you uttered just earlier, that instead our sacrifice are not going to be sheep and goats and red heifers. They're going to be the words from our lips, like Hannah did. She's taught us to pray. So the rabbis saved Judaism, and they said, instead of the temple we don't have now, let each Jewish home be a temple. And we've heard this time and again, because in every Jewish home, in most Jewish homes, the little girl and her mother are going to light the Sabbath candle. And so this is the temple. We're bringing God into our homes. And just one other thing I didn't want to forget was that like Hanukkah, we light the candles. So we kept Judaism alive. It's not fossilized. We all always cried for Jerusalem. It's in the heart. And what Kesta'a said was so beautiful. She said, if you don't like where you're living, then why are you there? Look at all these people in the United States who burn the American flag. So why don't they go somewhere else if they're not happy? Why do they make everyone else around them unhappy? If you cannot contribute to the common joy, then go somewhere where you could. If you're not happy, there's plenty of other countries in the world. And in Israel, if some people want to, like Rabbi Soloveitchik said, they some of the leaders, they were of the left, and they didn't recognize the greatness of the contribution of the rabbis. They were only mentioning, Brandeis and all those other big political figures. And another thing I want to mention is, Rabbi, did you notice Herzog? This film was done before this current administration. And now we have Herzog, who comes from that line. He's from that family, the president. And he is a real peacekeeper. He's trying to bring them all together.
It's so interesting. And we had McGill mentioned in Montreal. It was really, really nice, that piece. And I would be remiss also to mention one piece, and I also want to hear from others. And that is, the Judaism we know is the Judaism of Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai. It's the rabbinic Judaism. And another part of that shift was also the shift to Mikdash Me'at. You mentioned homes, but also Bet Knesset, the synagogues, which Wes hasn't mentioned. The shift from the temple being one place in Yerushalayim to different communities having synagogues, and that also served to preserve Judaism and to keep it going and growing throughout the last 2,000 years.
We haven't heard from Barbara Rabbi. Barbara, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot. Is she here? No.
She was here. I think she was having some technical issues.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was muted. Yes, I'm here.
Do you have any thoughts to share with us, dear Barbara?
Well, I'm really processing everything, I have to say. I'm so unaware of all this past history. I'm happy to be here because we're thinking and people are talking. But I'll tell you, today is also the anniversary of Fred's passing. So I'm not completely with it. I made up my mind to listen again. I'll repeat this because also my email, it cut out the lecture cut out 3 times for me. I had to go back and restart it, get myself back in it again.
That's why we're so happy we have Gigi's summaries also.
Yeah, because I don't know if it cut out for anybody else, but I have a feeling I have a wall in my dining room that it doesn't do Wi-Fi. It doesn't do a lot of things that it should.
Okay. So Gigi, thank you, Barbara. And our thoughts are with Fred. He was such a sweetheart of a man. He was so kind to me and my kids. Anytime we met, I think of him. I can't think of him separately from you. And you are just such beautiful people.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes. Okay. I appreciate that because it's been a very hard day. I'll tell you the truth. I was watching the service, trying to participate in the service on Zoom this morning also. So I've been up like from 6 o'clock, and
Sorry to hear
it's
that.
not an easy.
No,
Yeah, it's
not.
okay. It's
what
it is. Anyway, I'm glad I'm here. I'm very happy to see and hear Rabbi Ornstein.
Yes.
Dear, you are to me. You did Simon's bar mitzvah for him, and my family loves you, and we still appreciate you, even though you're not around, but we do think about you.
And he also, he conducted the Zoom for me, for the Brit Milah of my grandson in Florida. I was here and they were there, and he's the one who organized it, and many of you were on it, and I'm so grateful to him for that. Gigi, do you have anything to say? Thank you so much, Barbara.
I'm just gonna say that I'm stepping out. I'll keep it going,
Okay.
but I won't be here.
Okay, you have to leave. So
yes, but I'll keep it going. Don't stress. You're good. You're good.
Great. Listen, Ksenia, you are Rabbi Ornstein's gift to us. God bless you. Every time I see your beautiful face and I go on your beautiful website of your food, I'm totally amazed. Okay, so she's gonna leave. Gigi, I'm sorry, go on.
No, two thoughts came to mind. One is that I recall reading many, many years ago that with the advent of extreme groups, religious groups, especially those that seem to grow in power after World War II, using the Holocaust as an excuse to really hold the people together. There was a major shift in Jewish thinking. What happened is that and this refers to what you said, up until around the war, the Shoah, up until then, the center of Jewish life was the home. The center of the home was the mother or the wife. And then after that, perhaps a little bit before that too, but especially after the Shoah, what happened is that the center of Jewish life became your rabbi, and so therefore these groups become cults. Many of them, as I know, rather than sharing holidays, major Jewish holidays with their families and with their communities, they go off to the Ukraine for some pilgrimage or whatever. And the idea of experiencing a Jewish holiday of great meaning with the family becomes experiencing it with your rabbi and with a certain group of men or whatever. So that, I think, is a dangerous development, and thank goodness it is only extremist religious groups that have made this shift, and it hasn't affected the majority of people. Then you have the other extreme, which to me is reform, that isn't spiritual enough and isn't, they go to the other extreme. So that's one, the shift between what should be the focus. Where is your temple? Is it in a man? Is it in a rabbi? Or is it in the family, etc.? And I think that the family concept is so healthy and makes so much sense. The other thing that I wanted to say is that I think it was absolutely beyond brilliant that Jews such as Rabbi Ben Zakkai, and maybe especially him, understood that once we are dispersed and we want to retain our Jewishness because there's something God-given, some divine mission, then we have to take our civilization with us. and our civilization is based on thinking, remembering, trying to understand. And he worked out a whole discipline for that, Ben Zakkai. Let's be critical thinkers. Let's not be followers. It's just brilliant. So therefore, we carried our civilization not in terms of, we own all this land and look at how extensive our holdings are. No, it's internal, and that has enriched all Jews. It's so brilliant. I mean, it's beyond words in terms of brilliance. So that's it.
That we have to keep, if I may, Rabbi, we have to keep doing what Yochanan Ben Zakkai did. Previously, it was Queen Esther who said, everybody go and pray and go and fast for 3 days and pray for me. So it's always looking inside. And what do we find inside? It's God. It's the God who is creating the miracles that allow us to continue in this way. And then even after that, look at Shlom Tzion. She was even before. Was she before?
She gave the power back to the priests, the people, and the rabbis,
and back to the people through education.
About Judaism and the Jewish people as a religiously oriented people, as opposed to the Sadducees and the Pharisees concerned about power.
But she reinstituted the ketubah,
and universal education
and education. So time and again, we're going to find with future lectures, somebody had to step up again and save the day. So what is behind all of this? Behind all of this is the God of Israel.
Is the what?
The God of Israel. Judaism will never die. It will always live, because Judaism is the ambassador of God to the world, and we're waiting for Mashiach. That's the whole idea behind Judaism. And Mashiach is when everybody is going to, lefties, righties, everybody is going to have a very personal knowledge of God, and they're not going to refute him.
I think that one of the Jewish leaders who should have been in this list here, in this this agenda, is Donna Gracia, who also saved Jews, sort of saved the Holy Land, instituted yeshivot, universalized it, did so many things.
Maybe that could be another lecture.
The continuity of the Jewish people,
maybe
and
that can be a future lecture
to the Holy Land. Sorry?
Maybe that can be a future lecture.
Okay.
Thank you for that wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Rabbi.
So, yeah, so also what emerged for me as you were sharing, hang on, I'm just looking at the comment that Kessa just put. Thank you muchly for a most awesome, explorative, relevant talk. I've entered as much as I could in a very, very condensed, helpful way in a coconut in the chat sections. Hope that points out. Shalom. Thanks, Kesta. And you'd love to share what your research and what you're finding and with others. Thank you.
Greatest blessings. Have a good one.
Bye, Kesta.
Bye.
I'm glad you signed. I'm glad she signed off. So what emerged for me, is to maintain vibrancy. Like in Rabbi Yochanan's time, like Jews were divided, right? Left, right, zealots, others, and he found a way to maintain vibrancy and chart a course for the future despite all those deep divisions. So that's also one of the messages here for me that I'm taking away. What about anybody else who hasn't spoken? And Monica, do you have any?
Monica, unmute yourself.
Hey, it's very interesting. I love the lecture today. I absolutely agree. This is something I've been mulling over in my head for a lot for a very long time, especially since October the 7th with what's happening in Israel. I think, everyone being united should be a priority, and bypassing all our differences would show solidarity to the rest of the world and help bring a sense of respect and unity to the Jewish people, that the world will see that we are one people, even if we have our differences, that we're not trying to break each other down. Through strength, through togetherness, we have strength. And that strength, I think, is going to be the light that will get us through this terrible darkness right now. We need to strive, I think, for more unity if possible.
Inshallah.
God willing.
Absolutely. That is the key word right now. The magic word is unity.
Yes. United we stand, divided we fall. And it's true for everyone.
Yeah. They tried to kill us. We won. Let's eat. So let's sit around the table and eat together.
Exactly. And remember our one key faith, that is Hashem, to believe in one God and one God only, and that this is something to be admired. But showing division shows, I think, less of a faith in the Almighty, in God, and it diminishes the light.
Yeah, because when you throw God out of the equation, then
what are you
there's
doing?
no higher power holding us all together. So then who becomes the highest power? Me, myself, and I. And some people think that they know best for everybody else. And then that's how the problems come. The state, like Rabbi Sachs said, the state did the worst things. Look what Stalin did.
Yes.
And the market can't do much better. It's the communities that can build a better future, because they're the ones who encourage family life. What's going on now it started in the US, it came to Canada, and it bled all the way across the pond in Europe with this changing their sex and tampering with God's creation.
Right.
This is when you throw God out the window.
That's right, and that's the from the beginning of time. If you're talking about God and the Dark One, that was the biggest no-no, right? Trying to play God, and
Yes.
look what happened. So, it's cast to hell forever, and unfortunately, so many angels, were stupid enough to follow. But this is something that is a lesson, I think, for the rest of the world to beware of this. To stray like that and to think that you have this power over life or death, or over taking that power from God.
Yes.
Keeping the center God and keeping the center home and the community, and overlooking any differences in light of that focus. Like families even have differences, right? But you're still a family in the end. But
That's
you
right.
have to keep that unity.
And like Rabbi Soloveitchik said, you come into a room where there's a whole bunch of students studying Torah, and they're so loud, and because each one is so passionate,
Right.
and they are allowed to air their views in such a manner. So it's like a cacophony, but there's unity in that. There's unity in that diversity, because they're all aiming towards one thing, and that means going deeper into their study of Torah.
They all have the same goal, the same intention, to find the truth, to get closer to Hashem, to be closer to the divine, so you could be more divine. But that even if it's, you know, through argument, its purpose is the same.
And Rabbi Ornstein, thank you so much, Monica, for that. It's a beautiful sound to hear, the sound of harmony and unity. Rabbi Ornstein, the parsha of this week, or last week, where Jacob was telling his sons, you are a symbol of such, and you will do this and you will do that. Why did he have to go, and instead of saying, come my sons, all around me, be united, he actually took the pains to stay, and he's on his deathbed, and before he's gonna die, he's scrambling to tell each one of them what their legacy is gonna be. And the whole point is, you're not all the same. Each one of you has strengths. Each one of you has a gift. And that is what the world needs. And that's why you were created. Whereas when you talk about the left, I keep coming back to this. They come from the world of control, Stalinism. That's where it all started. And what do they say? You're all the same.
Yeah, shut up.
The same. No one is allowed to have more. Meanwhile, those leaders think they are God. They're the ones who have the most. And they're the ones who tell everyone else what to do. And who are they to say who must live and who must die? And yet they killed millions. And there are people who identify their whole outlook today with the left. It doesn't, for me, I just can't imagine how people cannot connect the two, not reflect on that.
Right. Scary, actually. Very scary. That people are willing to be
You want
sheep.
to say something?
Gladys.
No, Rabbi Ornstein.
One of the thoughts that is coming to my mind is I'm just so proud, so much nacha for my benot mitzvah, for my bat mitzvah women, who are able to have such in-depth and well-sourced arguments and grasp all of this, and are creating this. I mean, it's for me, it just shows the strength of community, and so that's one piece. And the other piece is, Gladys, I'm wondering what you prepared for lunch for us all.
Oh, you are hungry?
It's lunchtime. Yeah.
Yeah, we missed that.
Offer us the most beautiful table.
We'll send you to Denver.
Some delicious Iraqi food.
Yeah, that was a big part of the success.
That was lovely. It
together.
really, it was like the climax. We work and we think and we whatever, and then we socialize, we sit down and we talk and we eat, and it was just wonderful.
And not only that, but there was the Hebrew classes, and then there was the dance section.
Let's see.
It sort of built up, and then shoo, let's dance.
No, they were the best,
You see, Rabbi,
best years. Yeah, it's
the
true.
program you created, it is developing into different ways.
It's adapting with the times. We're doing like the
Right.
rabbis.
That's a great point. Yeah, technology and
We have
yeah,
to keep it alive somehow because
right.
me, I'm a grandma and I paint. Do you want to see one of my portraits? I have it here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I'd love to see it.
Hello, Dr. Zygmunt. We have Dr. Zygmunt from my building. Hello. Welcome. I want you to meet Rabbi Ornstein.
Oh, wow.
That's beautiful.
Who is that supposed to be?
It's Bernard Madar's son.
I can't hear you.
Oh,
Bernard Madar's son. He's the son of my orthodontist, and he's the cousin of my son-in-law.
Oh, what a
And he's just
beautiful looking
Very
fellow.
nice.
he's just such a
Very
man.
beautiful.
Nice work.
He's just such a
Very
mensch
nice.
that he inspired me, and it
Gorgeous.
reminded me of a portrait that Rembrandt did of his youth. And I said, I want to bring out the youth of this. And he's just such a mensch. So I hope it comes out.
Beautiful.
You did a
Very
great
nice.
job. My gosh, you really captured something about him. I mean, beyond the fact that it is extremely well done, there seems to be something like the inner person that comes out, maybe a bit in the eyes and the smile. I don't know, but there is something there.
Gigi, if I show you, which I don't have time, but if I show you the photograph from which I worked, it was very posed, I said, I want to do a portrait of you. Let me take a picture. So he wanted to make himself like, he's very humble. So he thought maybe he has to do a pose. So I tried to do the pose, but as much as I tried, it didn't work. Only the person I knew came out.
I can feel that. I mean, it's very alive. It's very alive as well. How old is this young man?
He's around 23 or 4, not more than that, I think.
So he's of Iraqi descent?
Actually, no, Moroccan Tunisian.
Okay. Well, the
They're
Moroccans are a good-looking people, let me tell you.
They're very nice people too. They are wonderful people.
Yeah.
Gigi, I can't wait to see your
But I'm gonna write.
And we look up.
I always feel such pressure.
No. We
But once I start, it's okay.
We should look up Toynbee's.
I remember that debate. I don't know where I was, if I was in high school or already in college. I don't remember. It was in 60 something, right? 1960.
Was it 61 or 62?
61.
Because I came with Hillel from University of Buffalo, and I went to McGill, and we went to Hillel House.
I used to go there.
We came for some big discussion. Do you think it was then?
I mean, the whole city was talking about it.
Wow! Imagine in our city of Montreal.
I came to McGill. Yes, I came for the weekend, and we went to McGill, and the professors there were wearing the black gowns, and I was so impressed with the school and the city and everything. And it was like in January or February, and it was very cold. Do you think that's when he came? When Herzog came and he spoke with the other man? Like,
he was
I
think we should send a copy of Gigi's summary and this lecture and Rabbi Ornstein's comment. We should send it to President Herzog.
I'd love to know when it was. Yeah, okay.
But I can look it up right now.
Okay.
And send you the link to that, because apparently he said you can look it up on the web, and I'll send it to
someone
you with her summary.
Yeah, that's why I want to look at the whole thing again, because I cut out 3 times, and it takes me time to get back into the thing.
You'll see the recording again. Rabbi, you wanted to
Oh
say,
yeah, just Kesta put it in the chat, I see.
oh, wow.
She put the link to the debate, at least the first part of it.
Oh,
And yeah, it does
In
sound
the chat, I don't even know how to get into that. So it's in the chat.
yeah, if you
That's
scroll
my
up a little bit.
problem. I don't know how to do any of
Or
this.
you can probably just Google Herzog Toynbee on YouTube.
oh, there it
Yeah.
is. Herzog
Yeah.
Toynbee.
Yeah,
Herzog Toynbee debate. There
that's
it
it.
is.
Mhm.
Wait, and how do you spell it?
If you
How do
click
you
on, just
spell
click on your
Toynbee?
screen.
Toynbee is what? Toyn?
Toyn.
And then what?
B-E-E.
B-E-E. Okay.
Very
Okay.
arrogant man.
It's January 31, 1961.
That's when I was here. My gosh.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's amazing. So I was at that lecture
You were
or
there?
at that discussion. I don't remember. Yes, I was there. I'm telling you, I was as a representative of my school, but I don't remember. I just was so impressed with everything that that
Wow.
really got to me. Not even what they were saying.
But where did you come from, Barbara?
I went to the University of Buffalo, and I was a member of Hillel. And they offered this
Wow.
anybody that wanted to come to Montreal.
Unbelievable.
I was 5 years old.
Was that for
Pardon?
the debate?
I was 5 years old in 1961, and I was in
Wow.
Iran.
It wasn't just
This is 61.
in 61. It wasn't just for the debate. It was something with
Barbara,
Hillel.
you
It was a
reminded me.
student exchange.
You
So
you
a few of
reminded
us
me
came
now
here,
something.
and a few of us went to Buffalo. But it's funny how it all came back to me.
Wow.
But
You're saying something.
I also had a history teacher when I was in school. I guess it's around the same time, maybe a year before. And that's when, now I forget his name, but Queen Elizabeth's youngest son was born. And he made the announcement, he made the announcement that this was something in history, like to be present at the time that the Queen's youngest child was born. And it was, and there was history books that we read. And not only did we read them, but so many of the professors that came as guest professors or our professors, they were in those books. It was just amazing. Everything was amazing in the 50s and 60s.
Of course.
It was wonderful.
Barbara, you reminded me something you said about Hillel. My granddaughter, the younger one, in Toronto, is now studying in the university. So she belongs to Hillel.
Very nice.
And what did she do there? She gave a speech, a very good speech about the Jews of Iraq.
Wow. Wow.
And she was applauded.
That's really nice. Wow. Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. Really, congratulations. It seems whatever she heard from me, she retained, and she gave a lecture about it.
That's wonderful, Gladys.
Yeah, this is the grand. My son to go to the high schools, all the Jewish schools in Toronto, and he used to give speeches also about the Jews of Iraq, and he had another topic: why Israel is important for me.
Is what?
Is important. Why
for me.
Israel is important for me. He gave it especially to the high school, the last class of the high school. He said to empower them when they go to university. So if somebody says something,
right.
Answer.
Yeah, that's increasingly important because
Yes.
the Jewish students are getting intimidated at
Yeah.
school, and
Yeah,
it's
he did
really
that.
bad.
Not fair. It's not right. It's
He did that
shouldn't
in
be allowed.
the high schools, the Jewish high schools.
About that debate, I just want to say what I remember is that it had this David versus Goliath context for many of us, you know, for the Jewish community, because Toynbee was such a giant. I mean, everybody assumed that what a giant as a historian and as an intellectual, and he was British at a time when Canada still was just getting out of that colonial mentality. I mean, still working at it. But so the idea that a Jew, no matter how bright and whatever, could stand up to this giant of an intellect and with all his information and say, "I'm going to beat you. I am going to prove that the Jews are not a fossilized civilization." And I mean, we were all on tender hooks. We couldn't believe that this was happening, and he won. I mean, it was obvious that Herzog won the debate. That Toynbee was humiliated. Apparently, his wife told him something afterwards.
Yeah, apparently she told him you should. I told you
not to. I think that's wonderful. And Herzog, so just say, is he the same fellow who is now the president of that? That's him.
Descendant of that family.
Oh, so is he the son, or he is the same man as the one that talked?
I would love to know, but I think because that guy was the chief rabbi of Israel at the time, so he's probably the grandson of the chief rabbi.
So it's quite a noble family.
His father is probably the ambassador who.
Yes. Okay, that would make sense. Yeah.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. I have to leave now. I'll be picked up in a few minutes to go for exercise at Chabad.
Enjoy, Gladys. Enjoy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm
Thank
good.
you, Rabbi, so much.
Yeah, so great to see you and all of you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
We wanted to show you that what you created in us.
We always think of you.
It's terrific. No, I love this.
And we're grateful.
I just want to tell you that
here brought us the photographer of the Queen from England. He showed us all the photography. He happened to be her cousin. So we are doing very well with the Zoom.
Wait, Loris, Auntie Loris is on the Zoom now. Auntie Loris, can we see your face? Auntie Gladys, Auntie Loris is here. You see her name? It's in the participant. So if you have to go, okay, don't miss your ride.
Exercise, yeah.
Yeah, enjoy it. But Rabbi, I just want to say I would have done more, but I can't. I have the painting, I have my grandkids, I have 2 jobs, 2 birds, 2 everything. So I would have done
Gladys after you.
But listen, Rabbi Ornstein, during close to Purim or in the spring when the snowbirds are back, I want to show a film done about Esther, which is very well done. Would you join us for that?
If you show me the date, and that sounds very interesting.
Okay, let's work on a date together to fix it.
Sure.
And we'll do an in-house thing, and we'll do food and everything, just like we used to do in the old days, the good old days when you and
nice.
Gladys were our leadership team.
That sounds great.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful.
So I know that you have to go because you're in a rabbi conference.
Yeah,
So we're
I'm
so
presenting
grateful
soon.
that you joined us.
Yeah, me too.
Thank,
It was
thank you,
really great.
Rabbi.
My pleasure. It's good to
Thank
be with
you.
you all.
So
and
everybody, Monica, Gigi, Barbara, everybody, even Auntie Loris, I love you. You're joining us.
you.
Auntie, I love you. So everybody, thank you for joining
Thank
us,
you.
and God
See you
bless you.
soon.
I'm gonna close the video now, but I just send you all hugs.
Big
Okay.
hugs. Shvuya tov.
Thank you for continuing the program.
Thank you, Sandra.
You're very welcome. You're very
Have a
welcome.
great time.
It's too
I just
precious
had an
to let
idea.
go.
Thank
I
you.
just had another idea for a lecture, or perhaps a lecture series, and it's
Yes.
based on something that I feel very passionately about, and I'm actually boiling on the inside with rage because there's an evangelical movement to
Yeah.
Christianize Jews, and
In
they're
Israel.
quite successful in Israel because so many Jews know nothing. So many
I know.
Israelis know nothing about their
Yes.
Jewishness.
And Rabbi
I wonder if we could
Tovia
have.
Singer. Rabbi Tovia Singer is
Oh
fighting.
yes, Singer, do I love this man? And there's a
Anti-Semitism.
fellow in Toronto, a rabbi in Toronto. He is
Yes.
phenomenal too.
Skobek, Rabbi Skobek.
Yes, yes, that's
Jews
right.
for Judaism.
Yes.
Great. We had him.
Thank you, Rabbi, again.
Tada,
Hi,
tada.
Gladys. Yes,
So,
we
Hi,
have two
Gladys.
very good ideas, Gigi. One is Donna Garcia and one is, okay, we'll
This-
talk about it.
To counter the evangelist, because I
yeah.
just had a dinner a few days ago with a couple that my husband and I met when we were in China, and anyway, they're evangelists. And lovely, lovely, lovely people. But if you don't know anything about Judaism, you will get swept away.
Thank you,
Okay,
Rabbi.
so we'll do that, and the rabbi will join us for the Esther movie in the spring. Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna close.
Bye. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Have a good class now.
Thank you. Oh, now I see Loris. Her auntie, I see the name. I don't know how to close it.